Hello! If you are watching this video, then that probably means that, much like me, you got about 5 pages into this rulebook before you ran away screaming. Syncanite Foundation is a new game from Timon Thöne, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and it is unlike any other game I have played before. I've played it a couple of times now, and after making my way through this rulebook, I noticed some problems with it that made it kind of difficult to learn, so that's why I decided to make this. Most of the resources I was able to find online for how to actually play this game came from the designer himself, and they didn't really cover all the bases I was hoping to see, so hopefully this will be of some assistance. This is a game for up to 6 players. We have it set up for 4 here, although the setup is basically identical no matter how many people you're playing with. In Syncanite Foundation, there are 4 main kinds of resources. You've got your money, which is called capital in the rulebook, somewhat confusingly given that these cities on the board are also called capitals. You've got your goods, you've got your food, and you've got your eponymous Syncanite, which is like magical blue crystals or something. Each of these things can be exchanged for either soldiers, which are also kind of like workers, or cards. The 2 main kinds of cards you're going to see are operations, which are black on the bottom, and briberies, which are white on the bottom. Now you will notice that nobody starts the game with any resources or any money. The only things that everybody is going to start with will be the same 5 cards, which will be comprised of 4 bribery cards and 1 operations card. Everybody will also start with 5 soldiers, which is also the maximum limit you can have without having to pay to upkeep them. That number is 10 if you are playing with 2 players. You will also start with a unique roll card, which will determine what color of soldier you have. The roll cards all have a special power that only they can use. And if you choose to play with it, you will also have a dignitary. Now this is an optional expansion that adds quite a lot of powerful abilities for each player to have, but they also add some complication. The final thing that every player will start the game with are these 5 victory condition cards. You'll need to hold on to these if you want to actually win the game, which I'm assuming you do. We'll talk more about these in detail later on. Before I get into how the rounds and phases of each round work, I want to talk a little bit about the cards and how they work. Operation cards, the black ones on the bottom, can be played at basically any time you want to. You'll notice that some of them say the word anytime on them, or some of them will say jederzeit, which is anytime in German. There's actually quite a bit of untranslated German in the rulebook too. Some of them will also have a phase number instead of anytime. Now, this gets a little bit confusing because while this one has a phase number and this one says anytime, you can actually play both of these anytime. The rule here is that anytime cards take precedence over ones that don't say anytime on them, and if a subsequent anytime card is played immediately thereafter, it goes on top. So you can use anytime cards to respond to the anytime cards of other players, and then at the end, after everybody is done playing them, you'll resolve the stack from top to bottom, from most recent to the oldest. The other thing about these operation cards is that they will all increase one of these crisis counters on the main board. Now these counters go up from 0 to 9, and if they ever get past 9, the associated crisis will flip over and activate immediately. The crises add a lot of chaos and confusion to the mix, and each of them sort of turns the game into a slightly different kind of game. But they also are really the only way you can actually win. Before any of these crises get activated, there actually isn't a way to win the game. You can lose the game, but there's not a way to win. Your goal then is to figure out which of these crises you want to activate in order to meet the victory condition on the associated card. We will talk more in depth about each of the crises at the end of the video. The other kind of card in the operations deck are these assassination cards, which have a little bit of red on the black. These are special and can't be played like other operations cards. You will instead mostly be playing them in phase 3. Over in the other stack of cards are the bribery cards. Now these can't all be played anytime like the operations cards. A lot of them look like this, with thumbs up or thumbs downs on them. These are called votes, either approvals or rejections, and you'll be playing those secretly to vote on laws in phase 3. Elsewhere in the bribery deck are cards that act a little bit more like operations cards. Some of them will say you can play them anytime and will also raise crisis counters. The other kind of card you will find in the bribery deck are these, privileges, with the gold borders. These are cards you can play whenever you get them, and they will give you powerful ongoing bonuses for the rest of the game. You're going to stick them down here on your little board. If you don't have this expansion, just remember that you can only have 2 at a time, and now you have a power that nobody else can use. Important to note is that your hand limit is 10. If you ever get more than that, you got to discard down to it to the respective discard piles. So let's get into the phases of each cycle. The cycles are tracked over here on the bottom right of the board with this handy little die. It starts on the 1 because you start with round 1. If it ever gets past 6, everybody loses the game. This die also tracks the value of money in the markets. Well, it says it does, it actually kind of does the opposite, but we'll talk about that when we get to phase 2. You'll notice on your Cycle Chronicle card that tracks each phase and what you do during them, that half of the actions during each phase have little symbols next to them. These symbols each correspond to the crises and will only be done if that crisis is active. So, for the first conflict phase, you're going to skip the conquest moves and the imperial servitude because war and tyranny aren't active yet, presumably. The first step of the conflict phase is to advance the cycle die up to say that we are now in the next cycle. You obviously don't do that for the first one, you just set it to 1. Then, everybody is going to randomly draw a doctrine card. If you have the Strategos roll, you actually get to draw the top 3 cards of the Doctrine deck and pick which one you want. There's 3 kinds of Doctrine, and there's 2 of each kind in this deck. The Doctrines only affect your actions during Phase 1, and they also come with a little bonus you immediately get upon picking it up. If you have the Superiority Doctrine, you immediately get to add 2 soldiers to your collection, plus the current cycle number. So in Cycle 1, you get 3 extra. If you take the Malice Doctrine, which in the rulebook is referred to as vile or wicked, but not actually malice, you get to draw 2 operations cards. And if you select Scheming, you get to draw 2 bribery cards. All 3 of these also have a special power that will apply during Phase 1 while you are placing your soldiers and harvesting resources. After this comes the Initiative Auction, where players will take all of their capital and secretly select the amount that they are willing to pay to go first. Everybody will simultaneously reveal the amount that they've selected, and whoever bid the highest gets to go first, whoever bid the second highest gets to go second, etc. Of course, in the first round, nobody has any money, so you instead determine this by randomly rolling dice. Then comes the deployment of your soldiers. Each turn in Phase 1, you will pick one of the territories, called fields, out on the board, and place any number of your soldiers on it. If somebody else is already on that space, you need to play at least 1 more than the number of soldiers they have there. Then, those soldiers go back home, and they can be placed in a future turn. The exception to this is if the player you're trying to replace has the Superiority Doctrine. Then, the number you need to place is twice the amount they have there. So if I had superiority, our friend the Pariah over here would need to play 4 soldiers in order to kick me out, instead of just 3. Additionally, since I have the Malice Doctrine, my special power says if I outbid this guy, I actually kill one of his soldiers and send the other one home. That guy's not dead forever, he will come back later, but he's not going to get to place him for the rest of this phase. Finally, since the Pariah here has the Scheming Doctrine, he's actually going to get 1.5 times the yield of this field when we go to harvest. Every fraction in this game is rounded up unless it says otherwise, so this 2 would become a 3, and this 1 would become a 2. It's pretty good. After everybody's done placing their soldiers on the board, they all harvest the resources from the spaces that they're on. Then, they all come back to their home board. It's important to note that these resources that are harvested from the board all come from their supplies, not from the markets. When your soldiers return to your boards from the fields, any number that you have in excess of 5 get flipped over to the other side, to remind you that you have to pay a food if you want to hold on to them. Thus, if you had the Superiority Doctrine, which gave you a handful of extra soldiers, now's the time you gotta flip them over. After everybody has collected their resources, we move on to Phase 2, which is called the Offering Phase. I do not know why it is called the Offering Phase, but that is what it is called. In this phase, everybody will have the opportunity to perform 2 transactions, one at a time, in turn order. Those transactions can be one of 3 things. You can either buy a resource from its respective market, sell a resource to its respective market, or convert these resources into either cards or soldiers in the case of food. When you go to buy resources from the market, you will be spending capital. You'll note, you don't start the game with any capital, so you're probably not going to be able to do that first. Each market has a track along the side indicating how much money you will have to spend for a cube at that level. With any given transaction, you are allowed to buy or sell as many cubes as you want to one specific market. So, assuming I had the money, I could buy all 12 of these green cubes with one transaction, but I couldn't also buy some food with that same transaction, nor sell anything to this market with that transaction. It's important to remember that the die over here that's tracking the cycle also has a track next to it, which is going to indicate how much each market is increasing or decreasing the money by. So for instance, if the cycle die was all the way up here at +3, everything you buy from all 3 of these markets is going to cost $3 extra. But everything you sell to those markets will give you $3 extra. The opposite is also true. Down here on the -3, everything will cost 3 fewer, but will also give you 3 fewer when you sell. There's a weird little side note here where some of these markets have 0 on the bottom, and if the capital value is a negative number, you actually get the cube for free and also get money. When you buy or sell from the markets, you are indeed dealing with these cubes in the markets. That's really the only time that you do. So you might be adding cubes to it and making it cheaper for other people, or you might be taking cubes away from it and making it more expensive. Now you will note that over here on the goods market at the bottom, and up here at the top of the food market, and up here at the top of the Syncanite market, if these two get revealed, or this one gets covered up, you will be adding 10 to one of the crises. If the goods market fills up, that immediately triggers the monopoly crisis. If the food market runs out, it immediately triggers the triage crisis. Another weird translation note, I don't really know why this is called triage. I feel like famine is a more fitting name because it's running out of food. But finally, if you run out of Syncanite, you immediately activate the Tyranny crisis. This one's particularly nasty. The final option for your transaction is to consume. Each of the 3 main resources in the game can be converted into either a card or a soldier. You can convert goods into operations cards at a rate of 3 to 1. Or 2 to 1 in a 5 or 6 player game. Just like the other kinds of transactions, you can do this as many times as you want. So since I have 9 goods on my board, I could immediately get 3 operations cards and add them to my hand. Then if my hand is past 10, I'd have to discard down. Similarly, you can spend 2 Syncanite on a bribery card, or in my case I only have 2, so I can't do that more than once. But if I had 4, I could buy 2. This number is 1 in a 5 or 6 player game. Finally, you can spend food to buy new soldiers. Now note, the soldiers only flip over to their negative side when you take them back at the end of phase 1. These new ones come to you face up. You just paid the food for them, so you don't have to upkeep them. And just like the other 2, you can do that as many times as you want in one transaction. After everybody has done their 2 transactions, or passed, comes the Dignitary Auction. Now, this Dignitary over here has been face up for the whole game, and everybody's gotten a good chance to look at them and see what they do, hopefully. If not, now's the time. Just like with the Initiative Auction, everybody is going to take their capital that they have and secretly bid the amount that they're willing to spend for that Dignitary. But there is a catch. The number that they spend has to at least equal the military value of that Dignitary, which is the number in the middle of the card. If nobody bids enough, or nobody wants it, the Dignitary goes to the bottom of the deck. If somebody does get them, they come to their board and replace the one that they currently have, sending them to the bottom of the Dignitary deck. Remember that Dignitaries are completely optional to play with. After that comes Maintenance. Now is the time you have to pay for all of your face-down soldiers. They all need to eat 1 food. If you can't or don't want to pay for them, they go away, and you don't get to place them next time phase 1 rolls around. Next comes the Parliament phase. This is where things get very strange. At the start of the Parliament phase, we reveal 2 of these laws from the deck and read them out loud. Each of them has a couple of different features on them that you need to pay attention to. The first thing is each law has a corresponding crisis that it will increase if enacted, and the number in the middle tells you by how much. Some of them are pretty high. The next thing to note is the color of the law. The color corresponds to a player role. That really only matters if you're trying to kill somebody. Perhaps the most important part of the law is the actual text of what it does. Let's take a look at the 2 we flipped up. High-frequency trading would increase monopoly by 3, and it would introduce a new rule where once per cycle, everybody can make an additional transaction following one of their own regular transactions. Now you get transactions in phase 2, but you also get another one in phase 4. So this would happen after one of those. This is the right of proposal, which says the chairman, which is one of the player roles, has the right to propose in phase 3, drawing 3 law cards, picking one to vote on, and discarding the others. Now, one of these laws is going to take effect. It's just a question of which. At this time, everybody is going to take their hand of cards and secretly pick some bribery cards to place below each law. Some of these will be thumbs up, some of them will be thumbs down, some of them will be other weird bribery cards that say instant effects like, this law passes no matter what, or if this law passes, we double the crisis value. The other thing you can sneak into law votes are these nasty assassination cards, which will target some players. Some of them will target the player whose color matches the law being voted on. So if you were to play that assassination here, you would target the purple player, the chairman. There's also other kinds of assassination cards, which for instance target everybody. After everybody is done voting, we reveal all of the votes that were cast, in addition to whatever other weird bribery cards were placed or assassination cards. If you get targeted by an assassination, you've got to check out how strong you are. Assassination cards all have a certain strength number on them, for instance 24 and 18. If that number exceeds the strength of your diplomat plus the strength of your soldiers, you get assassinated, and you have to discard one of your victory condition cards, which means you can't win the game using that victory condition anymore unless you find a way to get it back. Something worth noting here is that it is really easy to get assassinated if you are not playing with diplomats. Chances of you having 24 soldiers are basically zero, but some of the diplomats add quite a bit of strength and can make it a lot easier for you to skate by. That sort of feels like an oversight with the assassination cards, frankly. Whichever law gets the most votes gets passed. If there's a tie, the chairman gets to pick which one passes. That's their handy-dandy power. The chairman can also slightly manipulate the outcome of the vote. Place a law that gets passed somewhere, you'll remember it, and put the other one on the bottom of the stack. This is where we meet the other way everybody can lose the game. If, through some chance, 10 laws happen to get enacted, everybody loses. Now, you might think that that's not possible since it's only going to get to 6 rounds, but there are a lot of other ways that new laws can randomly get thrown into play. You'd be surprised how fast they accumulate. Now, the rulebook adds a weird little wrinkle about the laws, which is that you can just ignore them if everybody decides that they want to. I haven't really found a time where anybody would want to do that since most of the laws directly benefit one of the player roles, but it's possible. So if you find yourself in a situation where both laws are just really bad for everybody, you can kind of just be like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. You still have the law in play technically, but if everybody agrees that nobody wants to do it, then you just don't have to do it. After the voting is finished and the law is enacted, that is the end of Phase 3. According to our Cycle Chronicle, Phase 4 begins with the Roll-in Effecta, which means roll card effects. This is where the rest of the roles that aren't the Strategos or the Chairman get to do their special powers. The Magnate gets to move the capital value die up or down. The maximum amount they're allowed to move it is twice the current cycle. So right now you can only move it up or down by 2. The Censor will draw 3 of these headline cards and pick one to put into play. These are really crazy instantaneous effects that really rock the world of the game. And, like operations cards, they will all increase the value of 1 or more crisis counters. The Pariah gets to draw 3 of these weird advocate cards. Now, each of these cards has a power that says applies to only the Pariah, a power that applies to everybody, and some of them just don't do anything. The Pariah will then secretly pick one of these to keep, one of them to discard, and another one to give away or sell. A lot of these have really helpful abilities on them, so you can sell them to other players, and they can offer to give you any resources or money or cards or whatever in exchange for them. Of course, some of them don't do anything, and you can just scam your friends as well. It's important to note that those cards are different from these Pariah cards, which are actually completely unrelated from the Pariah role. I don't know why they use the same word, but I will talk about these in a bit. The Investor, last but not least, gets to draw 3 field cards and pick one of them to add to the board. These cards, you have to kind of find where they go based on the picture, and they all do different things if you have enough soldiers there to harvest them at the end of Phase 1. Note that, like operations cards and headline cards, these also increase crisis counters. After everybody is done with their Roll-in Effecta, comes player trading. This is where everything really opens up and you can just ask people for stuff in exchange for other stuff. The rulebook goes into great detail about handshake deals and how they're binding and what things can happen to you if you don't abide by them. It's never explicitly clear when you are supposed to do those things. I think now is probably a good time, but I don't really know. Then, if you have fewer than your limit of 5 soldiers, you go up to 5. Our Pariah friend, who we killed back in Phase 1, gets to rejoin his friends now. Then, before the round is over, everybody gets to do one final transaction. These are exactly the same as the transactions you have access to in Phase 2. The last step is to roll for market changes. You're going to take this fancy D10 and roll it for each of the 3 markets and increase or decrease the stock of goods accordingly. This says -2. I would take 2 goods off the market. After that, the cycle is over. We would start back again at Phase 1. Advance the cycle die up to 2, keeping it where it is on the money track. Everybody will return their doctrines back to the stack and eventually pick a new one, bid on initiative, and so on and so forth. That's a cycle. You're just going to keep doing that until somebody wins or everybody loses. Now, I hear you cry. What the hell are these things? Let's talk about it. As the game wears on, you've probably noticed, there's a lot of ways to increase these crisis counters. Not really a lot of ways to make them go back down. The second any one of them gets past 9, you immediately resolve that crisis event. Let's take the Revolution event for an example. If the crisis counter for revolution got past 9, we would immediately flip over these 2 cards. Every crisis has an event and a new game mechanic. The event happens immediately, and the mechanic will happen whenever it says it does on your cycle chronicle. So this one says Cutthroat Politics, and if we look at the start of Phase 3, that's when it happens, Cutthroat Politics. The revolution event says execute all dignitaries in possession of players. That's not so great. Then the cost for bribes and operations increases by 1. So we would have to flip over these little markers, and now operations cost 4 and bribes cost 3, or 1 less if you're playing with 5 or 6 players. The capital value marker goes back to 0 if it wasn't already there, and we immediately activate Election of the Chancellor. Now, Election of the Chancellor refers to one of your 5 victory condition cards. This is a special thing that you will do every round in Phase 3, but you will also do it immediately as soon as the event is flipped. The Chancellor election is essentially everybody revealing all of the thumbs-up cards they have in their hands, and whoever has the most wins, provided they have at least twice as many as the person in second place. After that crisis is done being evaluated, you're going to take the mechanic card, cover up the event, because you're not going to do that one again, and set them here to remind everybody that now this is in play. If you take a look at the mechanic card, it will describe what Cutthroat Politics actually does. And you might notice that there's this little -1 trophy symbol. That means you lose a victory condition card. It's worth noting that everybody starts with this special card called Pact of the Order, which is basically the only way you have to get back some of your lost victory condition cards. So let's say Cutthroat Politics forces you to lose a victory condition card, and you notice that war is all the way down at 0. You think, there's no way war is going to get declared. I don't need that victory condition card, and you choose to get rid of it, and then war were declared. This would be a good way to get back that victory condition card so you still have a shot at winning. Now, if you happen to be so unfortunate as to lose every single one of your victory condition cards, all hope is not lost. That's where these Pariah cards come into play. The instant you lose your last victory condition card, you're going to draw the top 3 cards of this deck and pick one to keep. This is your new victory condition, and it cannot be lost no matter what. They're all also extremely weird and totally change the landscape of the game. For instance, you might select the Scorched Earth victory condition, which immediately activates war and lets you start nuking the populace. You may also take Calvus Calcula, which immediately activates Triage and lets you start trying to stuff the markets with food. It's important to remember, though, even if you have a Pariah victory condition card, you still can reclaim one of your old ones and win with that. The Monopoly Crisis sort of turns the game into a market betting game. Everybody immediately gets a bunch of money and can trade for futures. When future trading is activated, you mark the current value of each of the 3 markets with one of these little acrylic bits. Then everybody will secretly use one of these bull or bear cards to bet on the value of one of these markets. Let's say I think the food market is going to increase in value by Phase 4. I would take my bull for food, turn it over so nobody else knows what I'm bidding on, and put whatever amount of money that I have underneath it. I'm effectively saying, I'm betting that I think food is going to become more expensive. Then, once the Resolve Future Trade step comes up in Phase 4, everybody will reveal what markets they've bet on and in what direction they expected them to go. You'll compare the current value of that market with the little acrylic bit that you placed earlier and gain the result. The way you will resolve that is by counting from the little acrylic thing to whatever the current value is. Let's say that goods went up from 3 to 5. Then I would take the amount that I bet and multiply that by 2, the difference between 5 and 3. I would get that much money. That includes the money that I already bet. I don't have that money anymore, so it'll come back to me, and then I will also get some extra. Similarly, you could use the bear to bet that a market is going to decrease in value and calculate the result in the same way. If you are wrong about the direction the market goes, you're going to have to pay that amount in addition to the money that you bet. So the money that you bet is included either way. If you can't pay the amount of money that you need to for being wrong with your market bet, you lose a victory condition. Finally, Monopoly also adds these foundation shares, which you can buy as a transaction for 250 capital. These do 2 things. The first of which is, at the start of every Phase 1, you'll get $100 for every foundation share you have. And if at any time at the end of a phase, you have 2 more shares than the person in second place, you win the game, as long as you have the Monopoly victory condition card still. There's only a certain number of these in the game, and anytime somebody goes to buy the last one, it opens an immediate auction where everybody can just bid all of their money. Whoever actually ends up buying this share immediately wins the game. War is by far the most complicated of the crises. It completely overhauls Phase 1 into a war game. Luckily, the rulebook is actually pretty robust when it comes to the explanation of how war works, so I'm not going to get too in-depth into it. You also have this little Battle Codex card that everybody will have, which explains the finer points of how combat works. Essentially, your soldiers are going from simple harvesters to all-out warriors. You will be moving them around trying to claim territories owned by other players by rolling dice in battles a la Risk. This is where the capital cities come into play as well. They will provide you with soldier benefits as well as income. You can't actually normally place soldiers in the capitals during Phase 1 unless war is activated. To win the game with the War Victory Condition card, you've got to own 13 out of the 19 fields on the board with your soldiers, or all 3 capitals. When Triage gets activated, you've got to immediately wipe out the entire food market. Note that the other way around also works. If you do happen to wipe out the whole food market, you immediately activate Triage. You also have to have the stock of the other markets. From then on, during Phase 2 every cycle, everybody will have to partake in humanitarian donations. They will have to donate an amount of each of the 3 resources equal to the current cycle. So right now, if this happened, we would all have to donate 2 food, 2 Syncanite, and 2 goods to the markets. If you can't do that, you lose victory conditions. The crisis can actually be ended, though, if the food market gets full and the other 2 markets fill up to at least 7. If that happens, and you have the Triage Victory Condition card, and you have more Victory Condition cards than anybody else, you win the game. If there's a tie, or nobody has the card or whatever, then Triage just ends, and play resumes as normal. When Tyranny gets activated, we meet the Ascendant, Zayn al-Zefri, and he goes to live over here, above the laws. He totally changes the game into a sort of PvE co-op game. When Tyranny is activated, we immediately lower the capital value die by 3, and everybody just has to discard a victory condition card. The game becomes a war of attrition to try and hold on to your victory condition cards longer than everybody else does. When Imperial Servitude happens at the end of every Phase 1, if you didn't harvest anything, you lose a victory condition card. And at the end of Phase 3, after everybody has voted between the 2 laws, the Ascendant just picks a new one. That's how you can get up to 10. Finally, at the end of Phase 4 is the Ascendant Tribute step, where everybody has to pay a ton of resources, and if you can't, you lose victory condition cards. The way you can win this game is if you are the last person to pick up a Pariah victory condition card. That is to say, you still have victory conditions and nobody else does. As long as one of the ones you still have is the Tyranny victory condition card. There is, however, another way to win the game during Tyranny. If everybody votes with assassinations to kill the Ascendant, then everybody wins. He's pretty tough to kill with a strength of 99, but if you combine your efforts, it's possible. So, in summation, if the cycle die gets past 6, everybody loses. If 10 laws are in effect, everybody loses. If you have the victory condition card for the given crisis and you meet its conditions, you win the game immediately. And if everybody works together to assassinate the Ascendant, everybody wins. The game starts out a little bit slow. It starts out pretty simple, like other games you've played. Place your workers, collect resources, use some goofy cards to screw each other over, and eventually, everything goes crazy. The more of these crises that get activated, the more mechanics are added to the game, and the more wrinkles and layers of depth there are. There's also more ways to win, but there's also a lot more ways to get screwed over. There tends to be a snowball effect sometime around the end of the second cycle. If you've only got 1 or 2 of these things active, it's manageable. The more of them you have, the more insane it is. So that's Syncanite Foundation. Clear as mud. I'm sure there's some stuff that I got wrong, and I'm sure there's some stuff that I left out. The rulebook does leave a lot to be desired. There's some untranslated German in there, and the structure of it is just kind of weird. But hopefully this will serve as enough of a springboard for you to get playing. This is really one of those games that you just kind of adjudicate it as it goes. You just sort of go along for the journey that the game has for you and figure it out as you're playing. It really isn't all that complicated. You just kind of do what the cards tell you to do, and if you have questions, you consult the rules. Hopefully, you can find your question answered in the rules. If not, the designer is extremely responsive online. He's been really good about that. I get the feeling this is kind of a labor of love for him, which is really the reason why I decided to make this video in the first place. Hopefully this was helpful. If it is, I might make some other stuff like this in the future. If it's not, feel free to leave a comment calling me all kinds of nasty names, and I will reply to every single one of them. That's probably not true. Yeah, I'm done.